Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are David Morgan, co-founder and vice president of operations at STS International, and General John F. Campbell, retired. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good, good.
Well, we want to have a little discussion here about a kind of a strange topic called rare earth. And there may be people who are listening to this or watching this, and they scratch their heads. So David, I'm going to toss to you. So what is rare earth, and why should they even be concerned about it?
So rare earth elements are materials that are found throughout different places in the world that are used in manufacturing of high-end electronics. Most people don't realize that rare earths are critical components of today's electronics, both on consumer, commercial, and industrial applications. So they do things like develop into magnets, develop into lasers, things like that that are critical for us to use on an everyday life.
So, General Campbell, so you're driving the Nationals game, you have a traffic jam, you get out your phone, you assume you're going to have connectivity to a satellite, it's going to get you out of that jam. So what you're saying is that if we ignore the supply of rare earth, we could have all kinds of problems in the commercial and military world. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Dave said, little known fact that it's in a lot of the stuff that we use every single day, both from a commercial, but from my perspective, from a military perspective, having been in the Army for about 37 years and taking a look at all the technology we've had over the last 18, 19 years as we've been at war, I look back and think, wow, if we didn't have some of the things we had without the rare earth element that was part of that, we'd be in very bad shape. And the concern really, and the discussion that Dave and STS is having is that, how do we maintain that edge? And today, we think really the nation has to have that discussion because we have some issues in rare earth elements and how we get it, how we procure it, how we acquire it, and I think really that's where we want to go today.
So to set the stage here, so everyone who's listening or watching should be concerned about rare earth because it's a vital component of military and commercial products. So what role does STS play in this whole discussion?
So over the last 25 years since STS has been in business, we've done a lot of work in integrated solutions for the military and also on the commercial side. And a lot of it revolves around training products and simulation and command and control. All of those components require rare earths to effectively be productized and delivered. So as the demand has increased, the challenges of having access have increased exponentially harder to get, and now a lot of that supply is being controlled by China. And there is no capability in the United States or very much anywhere else in the world to manufacture, produce, and deliver these rare earths that are critical to these components.
So is this a situation where 20% from China, 20% from Africa, or how is this distributed, the whole production of rare earth?
The vast majority, we're talking 90% or greater of the rare earth elements come out of China. They control the vast majority of the world's supply and the processing of rare earths.
It almost seems like we're in a time warp back in the 1970s where all the oil was coming from the Middle East, coming to the United States,
Sure.
and become energy independent. Well, right now, it's just fast forward 30 years, now we're almost subject to a monopoly situation with rare earth, aren't we?
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, a number of years ago, there's evidence where the Chinese leadership actually said in conference in public, the Middle East has its oil, China is going to have rare earths.
So, General, from a military perspective, does that get you concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. You never want to be dependent upon one source or one person or one country. In the military, you do everything joint, you do everything with your allied countries, but if everything is dependent upon, as Dave said in this case, a supply from China, we don't want to go there. So we got to have that national level discussion that talks about how do we open this up? How do we gain more access to it? In the 1960s to about 1980, actually, the U.S. was the leading producer. After 1980, as Dave said, 80 to 90% comes from China. So they control export, they control the price of it, and they've been able to fluctuate that back and forth and how much it costs, how much you can get. And again, from a military perspective, from my standpoint, as I look at the technology we had to prosecute military missions, whether it was a drone and having persistent surveillance, whether it was having sonar capability to look at ships on the sea, submarines underneath, those type of military applications are very dependent upon rare earth elements. So it's a national security discussion that we need to have.
So how esoteric a discussion is this, Dave? Are people on Capitol Hill aware of this? Are there any mandates from politicians or from lawmakers about warning us about the situation with rare earth?
Yeah, so late last year, the president signed an executive order raising rare earth elements and its importance to the national security of the United States, both from an economic standpoint and a military standpoint, and signed an order to have the federal government increase its involvement in trying to support rare earths. elements developed in the United States. And very recently, they've had a couple of solicitations, which has been great news to the industry. One that came out of the Air Force and one that's come out of the Army, that is looking to figure out how to build a supply chain and the infrastructure for the supply chain and all the processing and separation requirements to have the United States industrial base build its own rare earth element supply chain.
It's a unique application of a public-private partnership where perhaps the skills that the military have aren't involved in mining and refining, correct, and the commercial skills may be there, yes, but they work together to achieve the end of a supply chain that's secure.
Yeah, and it's really important that people understand this. This is the first time since the Manhattan Project, when, back in World War II, when they were looking to build the atomic bomb, that the United States government has actually taken a look at investing in the defense industrial base to build something of such a national critical importance.
So are we in a situation where the United States has a lot of natural resources and they just don't have many rare earth resources at all? We're destitute, we're nothing on the shelf?
No, it's two-sided, right? One is the mining requirements, and there's obviously a lot of restrictions for mining because you've got to protect the environment. You don't want to go out and extract a bunch of ore that isn't really going to generate quality rare earths. So you've got to be very conscious of that. But the biggest problem has been that is the separation and processing component of that. The Chinese basically flooded the market, and what was left in the United States was not economically viable anymore, and they ultimately went out of business. And so now there has to be both building out the supply from the rare earths coming out of the ground, the mining operations, which they're located all around the world. Some of the greatest components of that, we do have some locations in the United States, some in Texas, some in North Dakota, some out in Alaska. There's a lot in Australia is one other location, which is a friendly partner, but it's a very small percentage of the world's supply. And then some of the other places, such as like Afghanistan, actually have a tremendous supply of rare earths that's untapped.
So no one would have thought that 10, 15 years ago, where Afghanistan may have resources that can actually benefit the American military.
Sure. I mean, it's still a work in progress. There's still a lot of assessments and evaluation that needs to occur. But it is one of the concerns for the country like Afghanistan that it has a tremendous amount of mineral deposits.
Great. Let's take a break and come back, talk more about the economy and the military aspects of rare earth. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion, Rare Earth Elements, Why They Are Critical to the Health of the U.S. Economy, Defense, and Supply Chain, sponsored by STS International on Federal News Network.